My name is Brian Bossart, County Manager. We did this last year later in our process. And we got complaints doing it late in the process because there was this feeling out there that we'd already made our decisions in terms of how we build our budget. So we decided to do this early in our process. Last year, we had a lot more attendance as well, although we had some big decisions we had to commission for deciding and working. I don't know if that probably, I think, drove our attendance there also, but thank you to George, who's in the room, George Marlowe, one of our commissioners, and Houston's in the room. Where did Randy go? Houston, excuse me. No, Randy. Randy was here.
Eminently.
And we got a lot of staff in this room, and I want to speak to why that is. The budget that we build is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important decisions that we bring to our Board of County Commissioners every year. It funds our program of service. But there's a reason to our program of service, and the reason for that is the result of the work that we do in the community, right? Well, our government exists to build better communities in the end. And it takes all the staff that are in this room to help us build that budget, and then they're responsible for all the staff around on the street every day delivering that service. And that's why I highly encourage them to be in the room when we have these kinds of conversations, to hear the questions that we get from the community. Quite frankly, we got several hard questions. Was that 2 weeks ago now or a week ago? When we were in Georgetown. So I'm gonna ask the staff in this room to introduce themselves real quick and let the other folks in the room know who you are and what department you're responsible for. Tim, I'm gonna ask you to start.
Timothy Ryan. Sorry, meeting with timing Ryan. Public and environmental health.
Thanks, sir.
Joey Strebe, Public Works.
Aaron Crawley, EMS.
Go ahead.
Jenny Fulton, Secretary's Office, I'm sorry, I yelled right here.
No, you didn't.
I'm not responsible for the Sheriff's Office. So just-
I'm Carl Shell, I'm the Public Works Director.
Amy Saxton, Strategic and Community Planning.
Caroline Fortune, I'm the Human Resources Director.
Thank you all for being here. Commissioner Wheelock's in the back now. Should point out, I'm not elected official, Judge Jones here as well. So thank you for being here. I'm gonna turn it over to our Finance Director, Maria Ostrom. She's gonna kind of walk through where we stand budget wise, kind of give you an understanding of our financial picture moving forward, and then if there are any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you. Two more people. Megan Hyler's our public information officer,
God,
but you
sorry.
probably already know
Say what
that.
is, Brian?
You probably interacted with her. And then Rebecca Abrahamson
Thank
is
you,
our grants administrator. She does a lot of great work here at county and works closely with people, folks like Lalita. So if you are having trouble seeing this, just so you know, these are laying on the table back there. If you'd like your own copy, go ahead and grab one. I'd like to talk about the budget timeline in case you're interested in sort of following along in the process as we march forward over the next few months, and where you can still continue to have input, point out where you can still continue to have input. Talk about some of the revenue expense assumptions that go into the financial models we build. We are projecting future revenues, future spending, so that we can provide information to the commissioners and they can make the most informed decisions when they're setting that final budget. And then talk about our general fund financial outlook. We did this last year. We have an upside down problem right now. It's better than it was. It's a lot better than it was, but it's still a little bit upside down. We're spending more than we're bringing in. And we know, like as with your own household, you can't do that. You can't keep spending more that's coming into the bank account. You gotta solve that problem. And then it's your turn. We'll get to the end here where it's your turn to ask questions, get information and provide input that the commissioners can take into consideration, think about as they're working through this budget. All right, so here's the budget timeline. We kicked it off in May with the commissioners, got the process officially started. Here we are today with community engagement. We stopped in Idaho Springs a week ago, and we will be in the Evergreen area next week, talking with anyone who'd like to come to that meeting. And then in August and September, some of the heavy work gets done by all of these folks and their teams, is trying to figure out what are their requests going to be for operating expenses, what are their requests going to be for capital projects. And then they'll meet with the county manager and finance and go through all those, and we'll start plugging in values and trying to figure out how we can solve the bottom line. And then all of that leads to October, where the county manager presents hands his proposed budget recommendation for next year to the commissioners. They will have that in their hands and have about a month to study it and look through it. And then there'll be a November meeting, that's another public meeting where you absolutely are invited to come listen in to that public meeting. And they will walk through the budget and what's been recommended, and the commissioners will have an opportunity to ask questions about items in that budget. Then in December, at the first meeting in December is the budget hearing. We hope that we've arrived at a number that is acceptable for the commissioners at that point, and that they are comfortable adopting the recommended budget at that time. Now, we do have a legal requirement to get a budget adopted by the end of the year before January 1, so that will happen regardless. We'll get that done, right? We'll make sure it's done. Okay, revenue assumptions. Property tax is kind of an unknown a little bit right now. There's a lot of ballot initiatives out there. People are trying to get signatures. Things are happening. One of those initiatives has already been approved. You'll see that when you go to vote in November. That will have an impact on us if it passes. There's been some legislation that got passed in May that if that ballot initiative does not pass, we'll be living under that legislation. It will have an impact on us. So we're not quite sure. The best we can do today for projections for the commissioners is look at that legislation that's already adopted in May and project what we think will happen to property tax next year based on that legislation. So that's a bit of an increase for 2024, but again, it's an unknown, totally, not totally known at this time. Sales tax is becoming more and more of an important revenue source for the county. It didn't used to be, but it's becoming a bigger and bigger source for us. And we are seeing trends, we're lower year to date than we were last year. It's just not performing quite as well. This time last year, we were up double digit. By the end of May or June, we're not, we're flat right now. And we think there's a lot of reasons for that. One, inflation has kind of settled down a little bit. You remember last year, around this time last year, inflation was at 8 or 9%. And so it made sense that we were up 10% because we were just kind of keeping pace with inflation. But inflation has sort of settled down a bit, and we're not up like that year to date. There is grumbling in the market about a recession. I don't know. People have been talking about this for 2 years. It's hard to know, right? It's hard to predict. All we can do is do our best with what we know is happening in Clear Creek County. Intergovernmental revenues, this is a really big mouthful and a big word just to say basically money that comes from other governments, and most of it is grants. And this person right here has been instrumental in driving this number, this trend upward. And the commissioners made a choice a year and a half ago to invest in a grants person, a full-time grants person, to try to drive this number. We know there's a lot of grants out there. We know that we could always do a better job at going after funding this free money. And with Becca's help, we've been doing that. So we expect this, and we have built this into our model. It's kind of increased at about 2% a year, just going out for several years. Interest earnings have been great right now. Unfortunately, they're great for the county, they're great for the governments. They're not great if you're trying to get a mortgage, right? Rates are up there. And we think short-term interest rates are going to hold for the rest of this year. It's going to be a real sizable chunk of revenue, probably about $1 million for the general fund. We don't know that rates will stay sustained at 5.25% into next year. There's lots of talk in the market of a possible rate decrease, dropping the rate in September, possibly even one more time before the year is over. But we do think that whether rates go down 1 or 2 times before year end, it's still going to be a substantial amount of funding for our operations here at the county. Next slide, please. Okay, expense. What's driving the costs? Well, we built into next year and all future years in our financial model a 3% increase in staff salaries. And that was based on direction given by the board in their retreat early last year. They said, staff is our most valuable resource. We want to make sure that we're taking care of our people, and we'd like to see you build this 3% moving forward, and we did. Healthcare costs are currently rising. We hope that that's just, just kind of like a freak of whatever going on in the first few months of the year. We did see them sort of settle down a little bit in June. They've kind of settled back down. We hope that that trend will reverse itself and healthcare costs will flatten out. And when I say healthcare costs, I'm talking about like health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance. And the county has been able to not push out any premium increases to employees for the last 2 years in a row. And we were kind of hoping that we could get by with a third year with no premium increases and contain those costs. Now, some good things have happened here. We have a benefit that has the ability to, if we utilize it properly, has the ability to help us contain those costs and maybe even drive them down. So we're really hoping that's going to happen. And right now in the models, we've built out that it will be flat in 2024, but we're gonna keep watching that one. Capital expenses, right now we've programmed in a higher number going out for the next 4 years for the sheriff's office. They've gotten a little bit behind on their fleet replacement. They have some really old vehicles out there on the street, and we really need to help them to be able to keep those refreshed and more up to date and in good working condition. So the plan today would be to make a recommendation to the commissioners to pass a higher level of capital expenditures for sheriff vehicles. Service level changes, nothing programmed in right now, currently in the long-term forecast. Whatever services are being provided today, it's assumed that that same level is going to be provided moving forward, and that we wouldn't be adding new services. Now, that may not be realistic, right? And we're going to check in with you in a minute and see what you have to say about that. General fund financial outlook, I've shown this graph many times. We keep updating it. There's a lot going on here for any of you who haven't seen it, but we're going to walk through it. Red line is spending. That's the money that's going out the door. Green line is money coming in the door, all of our revenues. And then this blue line is our bank account. And you can see as we march forward from 2024 out to 2032, we kind of run out of money. We're using our savings account. We're using our bank account to fund salaries, to fund benefits, to keep us at the same current service level we are. And that just doesn't work long-term. Now, this picture has gotten significantly better in the last 2 years. Couple of years ago, we were looking at 2026, 2027, where we kind of ran out of money. And so there's been some internal things that have happened that we've been able to really fix some of this problem and spread that out, stretch it out into the 2030s. General fund, we pay a lot of attention and we talk about the general fund a lot. There's a lot of other funds at the county. EMS is a good example, our ambulance sales tax fund. All of our paramedics, EMTs, they're paid for out of the EMS fund, but they're doing okay. They have a dedicated revenue source and right now they're doing okay. General fund is where you see everyone that's, all of the employees that are getting paid out of the general fund are people that you might interact with on a daily basis. So this would be like sheriff's office. They're paid for out of the general fund. If you need to go retitle your plates, right, or renew your title on your car, you're going to be interacting with the clerk's office. They're paid for out of the general fund. So typical county services, they kind of live in the general fund. And this is why we spend so much time on making sure the general fund is going to be financially healthy well into the future. I think the next slide is Brian's going to take over from here.
Yeah, it's really an opportunity for anyone in the room to ask us questions about our budget. Are there things we're not doing today that we should be? Are there things we're doing today that maybe need to change?
Bridge.
Willow Bridge,
Does their budget come out of the general fund?
it does not. So that tax that was passed, that's a separate fund. And it's pretty healthy at this point. It's more of a function. It's probably more of a function of the amount of work we can get done in our short construction season. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair. Yeah, we've had staffing issues as well with the commercial driver's license operators, but the window of opportunity for doing road projects too. Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Just
personally,
Yeah.
I like roads and I like sheriff.
Uh-huh.
I mean, those are the two biggie ones that I drive on the roads every day and.
We get a lot of questions about our roads.
Yeah.
Nope.
Sorry, well, you said the second thing you liked, what was that?
Sheriff, safety.
Yeah.
EMS. I like being safe. Two big ones. Those are things I use every day.
Yeah, and that roads and ambulance they're in good shape right now. Well, you don't have that same problem that you were seeing with that graph being inverted.
The sheriff come out of general fund?
Sheriff is out of the general fund, so I was referring to ambulance, but. Yeah. No. Anybody else? Jody?
I just have a question. Do we get any money from the Denver impact anymore or other debt?
We get money that we pass through.
For a vehicle replacement or?
We get gaming money, and I'll let Becca speak to that, and the sheriff's office does get some of that.
Right, jail and patrol both get compensated for negative gaming impacts from the state.
That help pay for some of the vehicle replacement?
It's only about $40,000
Not big,
that we get, so it's not.
Kelly.
Did it used to be more?
I can only speak, so I've only been managing that program for 2 years now. It's been pretty consistent, I think, over the last 2 years, maybe decreased slightly. I don't know about before.
Anybody in the room got an answer to that?
I serve on the committee that decides those. It's really based on what you can document. And so, and in the prior year, how many people did you come in contact with that said they've touched the game? And I think those numbers have been very stable for us for a long time. That's at least my sense of things.
I was just wondering, because at the economic development, they were talking about, gaming had been down since COVID. And it was slowly going up, but I know a lot of people that just don't go gambling anymore. They chose another activity, so I just, just like my shutting down some of their operations, they're not producing as much. I just was wondering if that was as
Yeah.
well.
Not a big impact. Anything else? Yeah. No,
Sales tax, you mentioned that. What's the magnitude of that? How has it increased? And why has it increased?
Well, we get a little over 6.5 million a year for all county operations in sales tax. And some of it goes to ambulance, EMS, right?
But you said it's come up.
Some of it goes to road and
Last 10
bridge.
years, it used to be what, 2 million?
No, a year ago, yeah, it was right, what I'm talking about more when I say sales tax is in the general fund. We have 1% dedicated sales tax rate in the general fund, and that's a couple $2 million in the general fund. And it was up last year, it was up 16% through May last year, and now we're flat this year. So it could mean a lot of things, right? It could mean you've decided things are more expensive and you're like, I'm not gonna get that Gatorade and Snickers bar when I fill up on gas. I'm not doing it, right? So it's kind of a lot of different things are causing it to flatten out.
But relative magnitude, do we get 2 million or 6 million a year?
We get a little over 2 million, I think 2.4 million in the general fund of sales tax as opposed to property tax in the general fund. I don't know if you have it pulled up, Becca, is it like 11 million? Right?
sounds right.
And
A lot of
it's
the towns-
just becoming a big thing.
Our leafies really, it went down with Amazon.
Yeah, with now that we're getting our share of that, right? And we also see, when you look at our sales tax graph, there's a big bubble in the summer, right, with tourists coming up the hill and recreating.
Thank you.
Yeah. Randy, were you gonna add something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what I was reading between the lines of the conversation is that if you look at the overall sales tax, everything we collect in the county, it took a big jump, but a portion of that was because we created some new sales taxes for EMS.
Yeah.
RB and stuff like that. So people say, look how much more sales tax we're getting. Well, no, that's an additional new tax that we created for the purpose of funding this underfunded.
The general fund was basically around 1%.
Yeah.
And I think what Maria was saying was that our typical sales tax is the regular sales tax on everything that's not assigned to EMS, et cetera, it's risen, but not as dramatically as the overall sales tax numbers seem to indicate.
And it's also important that the penny approved for transportation for roads was a quarter of that's going to, we're splitting that with the municipalities as well. Anything else? Anybody online?
We have 2 people online, but
Any questions?
is asking any questions.
George? I thought you were raising your hand to say something.
I was sort of pointing to the sky.
Gotcha. Again, I think this is one of the most important decisions our board makes every year, and it funds the work that we do. So we clearly need input from the community. We probably need to look at some different ways of getting that and moving forward here. The public meeting is not going to produce that. And for those of you who are here, thank you so much for being here. But
We have this is like a 1-year budget you're working on.
yes,
Do you have like because I know Road and Bridge used to have a 10 and a 20-year budget.
projection. But you wanna,
We do maintain 10-year forecasts for all of our major operations, including the general fund, yes.
So a 10-year.
so that was that slide, you saw the slide with the two numbers on it where we were, yeah, that was a forecast for the general fund.
Capital investment in that.
It includes capital that might get paid for out of the general fund, yes. Whereas Road and Bridge, we have a 10-year model for them that we work closely with Carl and with Stoy. And that includes their capital as well.
And the sheriff does the same thing.
Sheriff's is in the general fund, so any capital expenditures on behalf of the sheriff would be in the general fund.
I didn't know if they made a 10-year forecast also or not.
You know, we asked them, that's a good question. We asked them as part of the 5-year, as part of the budget process every year to give us their 5-year plan. And so every year they're just updating the next year and refreshing their 5-year plan. I don't know that we've asked them to give us a 10-year.
Yeah, I don't think we have.
Yeah.
Because a few years ago, I saw the road and bridge budget, and I was impressed with how they took their big heavy equipment and
Yeah,
staged it out.
Yeah, they do a great job. I have to give Stoy kudos for that. He does a really good job with the 10-year forecast for
Yeah.
Road and Bridge, yeah.
same with our ambulance. I mean, we got to forecast out those big pieces of equipment we got to buy.
Yeah, 'cause that's big.
It is, and
But you
that's-
need- But you need it.
Well, exactly, and that's probably an area where we're gonna be bringing the board a request for an increase to add a third ambulance, so we've got more of them on the street all the time. So I guess from some perspective, that's when we say in service increases, that's probably gonna be one of them, is recommending to the board that we add some staff in EMS and buy an ambulance and the equipment needed to equip it, so. Anything else? Judge?
I know there's been a number of vacancies, and so, I mean, that creates cost savings because you're not paying those salaries, and I'm wondering how that is impacting the budget and how you're planning as you're trying to fill those positions just across the board, because salaries and personnel is probably one of the biggest expenses always. And so, but you have a lot of vacancies as well, so.
That's another great question. So as it impacts the current year budget, we do look at those vacancy savings and we're kind of seeing, where do we have some extra? Are we gonna be maybe over budget in this area, but under budget in this area, but on the general fund level? Okay. Long-term planning, if the FTE, the full-time equivalent employee, is authorized by the board, we assume we're gonna have it. So we are planning to be fully staffed in out years if it's already been a position approved by the board.
But that savings that you're referencing, right, is helping us bridge that gap every year, right? Because we're projecting to spend more than we're bringing in, and so all those vacancies help us to the extent we truly realize the savings. It's helping us with that.
Sort of a double-edged sword, because you need the personnel,
Right,
but you also need the money, so.
right. Randy?
I was gonna say it helps us until such time as we fill the position, which we hope to do, so
Right.
that we can maintain full services.
I mean, the transfer station is a great example of that, right? And we're just struggling getting that those positions filled, and while you're saving money, we're not saving the headaches. Based on all, because it's a needed service, right?
Maybe you guys want to talk about some of the cost savings that we've already found for some of the people that weren't here, like when we rebid our benefits. I think that would be really good, especially because this is recorded and
Yeah.
on YouTube.
Let's speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Learn about that.
We found some cost savings last year that were pretty significant that impacted last year. But some of those cost savings, one of them was something called stop loss rebid. That saved us $450,000 in the general fund last year. But what that did was highlight for us, whoa, wait a minute here. Maybe it's time to rebid benefits, period. Right? And so benefits, we rebid benefits, and we're seeing on a long term now, 700,000 to 800,000 in savings a year by rebidding all benefits, going with some new carriers. And as a result, we were actually able to sort of improve some of our benefits without additional costs for employees. And that's where I talked about that one benefit that got added that could potentially help us long-term save medical costs. That was added, and we're hoping that that will pay off and in the future show us long-term savings in medical costs. Another thing that happened is a lot of this staff kind of combed through their areas, and we decided, let's get rid of our water coolers. A lot of offices have those 5-gallon water coolers where you get hot or cold water. Instead, we put a water bottle filter at the water fountains in a couple of different places in the county courthouse. That was $11,000. That's not a lot, but you know what? You start stringing 7, 8, 9 of those together and it's a huge impact over time. That was another one. Dr. Ryan came into the 21st century and the public health they got like electronic records, a way to process electronic information. And so now they can actually bill an insurance company when they do a vaccination, for example. They can actually bill Cigna. And they are doing that. They've been doing that for several months now. And so that was a cost savings that the county was just kind of eating stuff in the past because we didn't have the technology to do it. Trying to think.
Yeah, those are the big ones. I mean, I think.
Oh, wait. Someone asked about E911 last time and we didn't have
Oh, yeah.
a full answer for them. So the commissioners made a decision to partner with Georgetown for E911 services, and that actually does save money. Now, in this first year that we partner with them, it's not gonna save as much as it will ongoing. Because we had to buy some software, we had to invest in some infrastructure to make sure that the county and Georgetown talk and work well together, right? We didn't want any hiccups. So we had to invest some things in there. In this year, 2024, I think the savings related to that partnership is gonna be about $140,000. But long-term, moving in out years, it's gonna be about $450,000 a year. That savings of partnering with Georgetown for that service.
I want to say thank you to all the staff in the room. I mean, they've been pouring through their budgets, looking for those savings. Maria and Carol Ann, our HR director, worked hard on those benefit changes. I also think it's important to note, I'm 3 years into my job, so I'm only 3 years into my job. But this work has been going on longer than the 3 years that I've been here, that Maria and many of these people have been here, right? So that combing through the budget's been going on for a while, and to the extent we're gonna find those big ticket items that are gonna solve that gap, I don't know if they're there anymore. And so then where do you go? Then you start looking at your service levels and things like that. So that's part of our challenge moving forward, is in closing that gap in the end is, are there big ticket items left that can be cut? So.
We do have a question online.
Okay.
This is Carla. Carla, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Mute.
This is.
Carla, can you hear us?
Land, she hasn't muted, Brian.
I don't think that just means the machine's muted.
Yeah.
I'll just have her comment the question.
Okay.
Oh, she left the meeting.
Oh, no.
Perfect.
Maybe she didn't have a question.
Apparently.
Anything else in the room? Sir.
FB, your fund
Balance.
reserve
Yeah.
balance. Do you have a goal other than zero? I mean, do you try to maintain 10% or $10 million, or what is the goal that you try to,
You guys are asking.
where are you trying to get to?
Really good questions tonight. So yes, the commissioners have a policy for the general fund that says they will maintain 30% reserve of current year operating expenditures. So, which is, if your current year operating expenditures are 22 million-ish, 20 million-ish in the general fund, they want to see a 3% in the savings account for unforeseen emergency circumstances where they could tap that reserve. In addition to that 30% reserve, there's a little tiny piece of it in there called the Tabor Reserve, which everyone statewide has to keep at least 3% in that reserve. And some of our other funds, we have a couple reserves. The Road and Bridge Fund has a reserve. I don't know that it's 30 off the top of my head. Is it 30% of operating, but excluding capital, maybe?
I think it's 20.
20, okay.
So the other one is 3% or 30%?
General fund by board policy is 30%.
30%.
Yeah, there's a tiny little amount buried in that 30. That's the legal Tabor Reserve of a 3%. It's
No.
kind of living in there.
So what do you do if you have a wildfire or a flood?
Well, so that's a
Snowstorm.
good question, right? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but 30% is high.
30% is a little high compared to what, like, if you look at like this geeky government officers association that people like me belong to, they would recommend 2 months. So, and around the neighborhood of 15 or 16%.
Yeah.
It's a little high, but it's safe. And you're exactly right. If we had a wildfire, the commissioners could meet and decide they want to tap that reserve, like it's important and we've got to use the reserve. We got to do this thing right here. And thank goodness we have $6 million or whatever's in the reserve at the time. Thank goodness we have that to react and do something right now.
I want to add to that. There's a reason I brought that up because I think the commissioners, whoever the set of commissioners were who adopted that. I think, I wasn't here, but I'm assuming that was due in part because we saw the problem coming in front of us, right? And we wanted to set aside that pot of funds to help us weather the storm. And that was that chart that Maria walked through where we're showing those lines in inverse from where they should be. That said, that reserve should be used for the unforeseen circumstance, the flood, I'm not so sure winter in this
My
time,
point
in the
being,
state
the
is.
reserve fund, it's not just replacing structures or the bridges or get washed out and so forth. You got the economic damage of a wildfire, your revenue just goes in the tank after
Correct.
a wildfire. No spending, no taxes, stuff like that.
That's typically the purpose of your reserves, not to bridge gaps like we're bridging right now, because we've got this structural problem,
Thank you.
which is why that percentage is higher than it would be elsewhere,
Good idea.
because the board saw that coming.
I
Yeah.
think actually, I think if I'm remembering correctly, that was a 2016 decision. That was year 2015, we got $11 million from that use in mind. 2023, we got 2. And I think you were on the board when you guys said, whoa, we gotta really put in a high reserve requirement to build it. And that's big. So thank you.
But we were worried about the potential impact of a fire. It's not just the 1-year expense,
Right.
because your revenue is just really difficult after that, trying to recover spending and property values and everything.
No. Anything else, Jody?
So I just have a little question about that fire that we just had in the DLD area.
Okay.
And I mean, very aggressive, thank goodness, that they had the aerials. Who pays for that?
Who pays
For when the helicopters were
helicopters
dropping the
and things.
water
Oh.
and, you know, because that was called in immediately. It was, to me, kind of a fairly small fire that could have gotten out of
Right.
control, but does that come out of the general fund?
no, the county does not pay that.
So
That's not a
like
county,
National disaster type thing.
that's state maybe
Part of
funding.
Division of Public Safety.
Yeah, the state might be paying that, fire authority, does the fire authority have a percentage of that maybe even? It's definitely not coming out of the county's budget.
Okay.
Anything else? Well, thank you for being here to talk at this exciting subject of budget. Do appreciate it.